Okay, here we go. Thidwick the Big-Hearted Moose. Written and illustrated by Dr. Seuss. Up at Lake Winnebago, Bango, the far northern shore, there's a huge herd of moose, about 60 or more. And they all go around in a big happy bunch, looking for nice tender moose moss to munch. Up at Lake Winnebago one day, they were lunching, just strolling along and enjoying their munching, for moose moss that day was especially fine. When it happened that Thidwick, the last moose in line, saw a bingo bug sitting, the bug called out, "Hey, it's such a long road. It's such a hot day. Would you mind if I rode on your horns for a way?" "Of course not," smiled Thidwick, the big-hearted moose. "I'm happy my antlers can be of some use. There's room there to spare, and I'm happy to share. Be my guest, and I hope that you're comfortable there." So the big bingo bug picked out a nice easy seat, and the moose went on looking for moose moss to eat. Look at him. Right there. Well, an hour or so later, the bug heard a squeak, and he heard a small voice of a tree spider speak. "You've got a fine place. That moose seems quite friendly. Has such a nice face. If I got to go on too, do you think he would mind?" "Hop aboard," laughed the bug, "and I think you'll be fine. That the moose won't object. He's a big-hearted kind." "I accept," said the spider with joy and delight, and he started a web on that horn to the right. While the spider was spinning, he heard a gay song, and a fresh little zinazoo bird came along. He stopped, and he stared, and he chirped, "Well, well, well! What a smart place to build! What a great place to dwell! I've been living in trees ever since I was born, but there's something new. Why not live on a horn? If there's room for two, then there must be room for three." "There's plenty of room," laughed the bug, "and it's free." Thidwick stopped walking. What was all that talking? These guests had caught Thidwick, the moose, unawares. "Hey," he yelled, "what out? What goes on upstairs?" "Just building a nest, sir," the zinazoo said, "and been yanking out hairs of poor Thidwick's head. Ouch!" And he plucked out exactly 204. "Don't worry," he laughed. "You can always grow more." Then he dozed off to sleep in his fine moose hair nest. "This bird," murmured Thidwick, "is sort of a pest. But I'm a good sport, so I'll just let him rest. For a host, above all, a host must be nice to his guest." Then Uncle, a woodpecker, started in drilling. And Thidwick's friends shouted, "Get rid of those pests." "I would, but I can't," said poor Thidwick. "They're guests." "Guests indeed," his friends answered, and all of them frowned. "If those are your guests, we don't want you around. You can't stay with us, 'cause you're just not our sort." And they all turned their backs and walked off with a snort. Now the big friendless moose walked alone and forlorn, with 4 great big woodpecker holes in his horn. "What holes?" whispered Herman, a squirrel who spied 'em. "What holes? To hide nuts in." Mind if I try 'em?" "They're yours," called the woodpecker. "Get right inside 'em. This big-hearted moose runs a public hotel. Bring your nuts, bring your wife, bring your children as well." So the whole squirrel family all jumped on pell-mell. And the very next thing the poor animal knew, a bobcat and turtle were living there too. Now what was the big-hearted moose going to do? Well, what would you do if it happened to you? You couldn't say scat, 'cause that wouldn't be right. You couldn't shout scram, 'cause that's just not polite. A host has to put up with all kinds of pests, for a host above all must be nice to his guests. So you tried hard to smile, and you tried to look sweet, and you'd go right on looking for moose moss to eat. But now it was winter, and that wasn't easy, for moose moss gets scarce when the weather gets freezy. The food was soon gone on a cold northern shore of the Lake Winnebago, where just was no more. And all of Thidwick's friends swam away in a bunch to the south of the lake, where there's moose moss to munch. He watched the herd leaving, and then Thidwick knew he'd starve if he stayed. He'd have to go too. He stepped in the water, then oh, what a fuss. "Stop!" screamed his guest. "You can't do this to us. These horns are our home, and you've no right to take our home to a far distant side of the lake." "Be fair," Thidwick begged, with a lump in his throat. "We're fair," said the bug. "We've decided by vote. All of those favor in going said A. All those favor in staying said nay." "A!" shouted Thidwick. But when he was done, "Nay," they all yelled, and he lost 11-1. "We win," screamed the guest, "by a very large score," and poor starving Thidwick climbed back on the shore. Then you know what those pests did? They added some more. They asked a fox who jumped in from the trees. They asked some mice, and they asked in some fleas. They asked a big bear, and then, if you please, came a swarm of 362 bees. Poor Thidwick sank down with a groan to his knees, and then something that made his heart freeze. Bullets came zinging right past Thidwick's face. Guns were banging all over the place. "Get that moose, get that moose," Thidwick heard a voice call. "Fire again and again, and shoot straight, one and all. We must get his head for the Harvard Club wall." Thidwick took to his heels with a load on his head. With 500 pounds on his horns, the moose fled. He could have ran faster without all those pests, but a host above all must be good to his guests. Up the canyon, off the cliff, over wild, rocky trail, with bullets bouncing around him like hail. Big gully through gulch, and down slippery sluice, with his hard-hearted guest, raced the soft-hearted moose. Think he'll get away? We'll see. If I can turn the page. There we go. Then finally they had him because of those pests. He had ran out of luck because those guests on his horns, he was stuck. He gasped and he felt faint, and the whole world was fuzzy. Thidwick was finished completely, or was he? Finished? Not Thidwick. Decidedly not. It's true, he was in the most terrible spot, but now he remembered a thing he'd forgot. A wonderful something that happens each year to the horns of all moose and horns of all deer. Today was the day Thidwick happened to know that the old horns came off so new ones could grow. And he called to his pests on these horns as he threw them, "You want my horns? Now you're welcome to 'em. Keep 'em, they're yours. As for me, I shall take myself far distant to the side of the lake." And he swam Winnebago and found his old bunch and arrived in just time for a wonderful lunch at the south side of the lake where the moose mosses to munch. And his whole old horns today are where you knew they would be. His guests are still on them, all stuffed as they should be. I hope you enjoyed Thidwick, the Big-Hearted Moose by Dr. Seuss.